And we're back here, folks, on the MCU Rewatch Review series. Obviously, the timing could not have been worse, considering the recent events. We're recording this actually on August 29th. Chris and I were always going to be doing this podcast today. Joining us is Phil Lindsey from the Bleacher Report crew. Phil, welcome onto the show for the first time. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And I told Chris previously, we discussed this on their podcast, that it was my goal, as well as Chris's, to get as many Bleacher Report people on this show as possible. And it's cool to see as many Bleacher Report people into Marvel and the MCU, which is awesome. So I'm very happy we could talk Black Panther with you here today. And Chris as well. Chris, welcome back to the show as always.
Thank you.
So again, we're recording this on August 29th, 2020, which is important to note because we're less than literally 24 hours removed from the news that Chadwick Boseman had passed away at the age of 43 from cancer, which obviously shocked everybody. We were discussing this over DMs last night. And again, it's important to note because we record these shows so far in advance sometimes. And this is a case where we were always going to be doing this podcast today. I was always going to be watching the movie this morning, and then this hit yesterday. And we were just talking before we went on the air here how you never really know what someone is going through until something like this happens. Phil, you had mentioned the video that Chadwick had posted. I think it was on his Instagram earlier this year in April, where he didn't, look too well. But a lot of people didn't think twice of it. Chris, you had mentioned that, you had thought he may have been slimming down for a role, which is completely common when it comes to movies. But obviously, we're not going to be just discussing this movie, but rather just the legacy, in addition to the film, of Chadwick Boseman, his role as Black Panther, and just how heartbreaking this whole thing is. So, Chris, I'll start with you. We got to start with the obvious here. Your thoughts on the passing and how shocking it all was.
I mean, yeah, it's incredibly sad. He was only 43 years old. Colon cancer is a terrible way to go. And, I mean, it's just, I'm still in shock, honestly, because it's like, you feel like celebrities sometimes because so much information about them is exposed. And then when somebody like Chadwick Boseman dies suddenly at the age of 43, it really makes you step back and look at things and be like, wow, there's really no guarantee for tomorrow for anybody, so it's rough.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you put it perfectly there. There's absolutely no guarantees as far as tomorrow is concerned. And I was also surprised. I didn't even know he was 43. I thought he was like 30 something. The guy does not look 43 at all. Not that 43 is that old, but I could have sworn he was like mid 30s, early 30s, whatever. So that surprised me as well. But Phil, what was your reaction to the news upon it breaking last night that Chadwick had passed away?
It was just devastating. It was kind of like I saw it, and it's kind of like you know how you have that feeling, and it's like in the pit of your stomach, it just dropped. I just had to just stop and just sit down and take it in. It was just really, really stunning. Like I still can't believe it, really.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone can. It's one of those things too, where it's like you just can't believe it, and especially now where. We've had a lot of, people pass away every year, obviously, but 2020, especially given the current circumstances, has been complete shit for a lot of people. And when you read stuff like this, and again, the guy was not old by any means. We've had a lot of celebrities pass away this year that were older, but not Chadwick. The guy was only 43, which is just unbelievable. And it really hits hard, too, because he's been a big part of a lot of different movies, not just the MCU. He was in 42. He was in a movie just last year as well. I forgot the name of it. Do you know what movie I'm talking about, Chris? He was in, I forgot what the name of it was.
Well, he was in 2 movies in the last year. He was in 21 Bridges, which was like an action drama kind of thing.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of, yeah.
And then he was in Spike Lee's movie, The Five Bloods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I was thinking of 21 Bridges, because wasn't that the movie that was directed by the Russo brothers from MCU?
No, that was directed by a guy named Brian Kirk.
Oh, I thought, weren't the Russo brothers involved in some project with Chadwick, or is that someone else?
They may have produced it, through their production company or something. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I could have sworn I had seen, maybe, I thought it was for that movie. I thought they were
involved.
It
shows them as producers here.
Okay.
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. Because I remember seeing the trailer, then it said, from the people that brought you Infinity War, Civil War, Endgame, blah, 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 and that's how they promoted it. But yeah, no, that's crazy. It's nuts. And, this movie only came out 2 years ago. When we were discussing before, Phil had mentioned that he has actually been battling the cancer since 2016 is what a lot of the reports have been saying. For the last 4 years, and this movie, I assume, was made in 2017, 2016, before it was released 2 years ago. So the fact that he was able to continue to carry on doing these roles and come across as a legitimate superhero, and we talk about this stuff all the time, Chris, with these movies, and there's superhero movies and whatnot, but like the guy was like a real life superhero. I saw Mick Foley say that on Twitter this morning, and I couldn't agree more. So it's just
you never read a bad word about the guy. Like nobody has anything bad to say about him, about working with him, about knowing him. Any video you see of him meeting fans, like everybody just looks incredibly excited to see him, and he looks happy to see them too.
Yeah, no, most definitely. There's a lot of footage of that going on right now that people are sharing on Twitter, which is cool. And I know I had seen some text exchange that he had with, I think it was Josh Gad who had shared it on Twitter, I think either late last night, early this morning, that he had with Chadwick. And just he was incredibly positive and upbeat, even given the current circumstances with what he was going through, full well knowing what he was going through and everything else going on in the world right now. The guy, maintained a positive attitude, and then, you just can't commend that anymore. And again, it's incredibly devastating. So, and it makes it that much harder to watch a movie like this with the performance that he had and knowing that he was such a great person, losing him way, way, way too soon. And it's just, again, I don't want to just strictly talk about the MCU here, but with a movie like this, it wasn't just another MCU movie. It was definitely, and we'll see if you guys agree, I'm going to ask you in a moment, definitely one of the most influential movies in the MCU, one of the most talked about, that appealed to just more than just Marvel fans. And I guess you could say that about other movies, but just the money this movie generated, the amount of people that went to go see it and whatnot was just incredible. And its legacy is still talked about even 2.5 years later. Would you agree with that, Phil, with just the impact that this movie had on literally everybody, and just how big of an impact? This isn't just losing some random actor. This is a huge, huge deal with what this movie meant to a lot of different people when it came out 2 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just as a black man, just seeing something like that come out and become a billion-dollar franchise it's a huge deal. I mean, just back on who Chadwick was, and just he was just such a personable guy. You could tell that he wasn't a guy that went into this trying to be a Robert Downey Jr. of the world. It didn't look like he wanted to be like this big famous actor. From what I understood, he wanted to be a writer and director, and he kind of came into being an actor after that. And you kind of tell that just by the way he moved, because he was so personable. He was so invested in intimate relationships. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so to see just him succeed on that level was just really cool to see as well, because I don't want to say he was a small unknown actor, but just like I said, just because he was such a different guy as compared to the rest of the people in that cast. Mm-hmm. And just to see him alongside people like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and a lot of these other big names, and he had carved his lane alongside them. It was really cool to see that. And just as far as like the impact of it, I remember when it came out, and my dad is in his 60s, and he called me before the movie came out, because he knows I'm like a big Marvel fan. Mm-hmm. So he called me before it came out, and he was like, "Don't go see the movie without me. I'm going to come get you. We're going to go see it together." So me and my dad went to see it opening day. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just going to see it with him opening day and just seeing so many black people out and being excited about this movie, I would have never guessed that from, 10 or 15 years earlier, reading Christopher Priest comics in my room and thinking like Black Panther would ever become a movie and that it would become such a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable. And even, again, the movie is still relatively recent. It only came out 2.5 years ago. But it's a movie that, again, its reach goes well beyond, comic book fans, Marvel fans, whatever. I saw a lot of people saying Wakanda Forever, upon the news breaking last night. And more people than just that I know were Marvel fans, just knowing the impact of the movie and whatnot. So I completely agree with you there. What about you, Chris? With, Phil had mentioned, the expectations of the Black Panther character coming into the movie and whatnot. Did you expect coming into this, prior to its release, for this movie to be as big as it was when it came out in 2018?
I mean, just based off what I saw of him in Civil War, I knew it was going to be a good movie. And then once you look at the entire list of people involved, I mean, Ryan Coogler as the director, and then you have this amazing cast of people around him, like Michael B. Jordan, Lupita Nyong'o, Denai Guerrera. I mean, even, Martin Freeman, and then, of course, Andy Serkis as Claw. Like, all those ingredients together, it was obvious that this was going to be a good movie, but like I try not to go into anything with the expectations. So the fact that it was like, $1.3 billion movie and like pretty much one of Marvel's most well-reviewed movies, like I was very happy to see that, because at the time we all thought this character is going to be super important to the future of Marvel, and obviously now that's thrown up in the air. So it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do going forward. I know it's the day after he died, so I hope they're not having that discussion yet. But it is Disney, so
Yeah.
you know that they're going to be looking for options right away.
Yeah, no, definitely. Before we go even any further with the movie itself, I completely agree with you on that this is definitely something they should be waiting on for a while. And it's not like, again, the movie was set to come out, actually, I think it was going to be in a couple years, right? Was it 2022? Was the scheduled release date?
Yeah, it was technically in pre-production, so nothing had been shot. I don't think there was even a script fully ready. But they were going to start doing stuff with it, I believe, early next year, if everybody was available, because obviously all the productions getting pushed back is screwed with people's schedules.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I thought it was 2022, so that would make sense. Yeah, I was going to ask you at what stage Black Panther 2 was at, because I know they announced it about a year ago, and it wasn't supposed to come out for a while, so I figured they hadn't really done much with it yet. But back to Chadwick for a moment. Chris, I'll start with you. When they had announced him for the role, again, I had mentioned earlier he was a part of the 42 film that came out, I forgot exactly when, but a few years before this, and I think a lot of people consider that to be his breakout role in film. I mean, obviously, we know now that he was the perfect fit for the Black Panther, for the T'Challa character. Going into it, though, again, you said you don't have many expectations going into these movies, but when you hear that Chadwick is announced to be the next Black Panther, and again, we already knew, obviously, going into this movie because he was in Civil War, but going into it, do you feel, okay, this is a perfect fit for this character, with Chadwick portraying Black Panther?
I mean, before this, my only real experience with him was from Get On Up. I didn't see 42 until after Black Panther, but I saw him play James Brown in Get On Up, and he did a great job. So I was like, oh, well, if he can do the whole body transformation thing like all these other Marvel stars, I'm sure he'll be great, because he was great in that movie.
Yeah, no, most definitely. What about you, Phil? Do you feel that, I mean, again, going in, we know now that he was the perfect fit, but did you think going in, it's like, again, we hear Chadwick being portrayed as Black Panther, and all the Marvel fans rejoice because he ended up being a great fit for it. Did you feel the same? Were you looking forward to seeing him play that role going into Civil War and then later Black Panther itself, the movie?
Well, I mean, for me, I still was of the belief that this movie was one of those things like Watchmen that we would never see get made. So once it was announced, I was excited regardless who was doing it. So I think that was the Comic-Con in San Diego when they announced it, and they put out the picture of Chadwick with Robert Downey and Chris Evans, and I was just super excited when I saw it, because at first I thought they were going to cast Chiwetel, because he's close with everybody around it. He's done other work with Joss Whedon. It just seemed like it made sense. But when I saw it, and at the time Chadwick was a lot younger, he had a lot of positive momentum going because he had just done Get On Up, and I thought it was a great casting choice.
Yeah, and again, like I said, he ended up being just absolutely perfect for it. So again, this was not the first time we'd seen Chadwick as T'Challa, as the Black Panther in the MCU. As we previously mentioned, he was in Civil War. That was also where we got the introduction of Spider-Man. Now, I know Chris and I, we've discussed this before when we did the Civil War review, if we felt there were too many characters, if they tried to introduce too many people at once, with that being the big debut of both Black Panther and Spider-Man. Did you feel? I'll start with you, Phil. Did you feel that was the right time to introduce Black Panther into the MCU to kind of give people a taste of what the character was all about, or would you have rather them waited for his big movie for him to get the spotlight all to his own upon his debut in the MCU?
I think they did the right way, because I think one of the things you noticed with Black Panther once it was released is that the cast was so big and that there were so many interesting characters in his own movie. We got to see him shine and be great outside of that, and you kind of realize why he was this cool character before the movie came out. Because I think there were so many moments in Civil War where he just kind of stole the show, like when the fight where he's running up the street to chase down Bucky, and the fight on a building, and he's just like withstanding bullets. Nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Yep.
So I thought it was cool how they introduced him. I never felt like they overdid it with him. I always felt like he had a really good character arc going throughout Civil War. Just the way they introduced him and his father's relationship was really good. Even just how he was kind of part of the revolution was really good.
What about you, Chris? Again, we've discussed this before when we reviewed Civil War a little while ago, as far as whether this was the right time or if they should have waited or whatever. How do you feel about it? Do you think they made the right choice as well, in agreement with Phil, that they should have included the Black Panther character in the Civil War? Because, again, he was one of the best parts of that entire movie with how he came across and some of those action scenes. You knew he was badass right from the get-go. And I think I had mentioned in that review that I just found they established the father-son relationship with him and his dad right off the bat, and then literally within minutes they kill the dad off, and then he has a motivation to go after who he thought was Bucky had killed his dad. Obviously it wasn't. But anyway, so what were your thoughts on the incorporation of Black Panther in Civil War as kind of a preview of what to expect in the movie itself a couple of years later?
I thought they did a good job with it, and I thought it was smart for them to introduce him as already being a badass fighter in the Black Panther, because so many of these movies are about the hero's origin story, and we don't need to see that with everybody.
Yep.
And I think it was more interesting to see him have that journey of becoming a better leader in Black Panther. Like, everybody else, their movies are about, their personal journey, and with this, it allowed the Black Panther movie to be about him becoming a better king in the end, which is, in my opinion, a separate role for him than the superhero stuff. He essentially has to live two lives, even though he doesn't have a secret identity. And I thought it was a great approach for them to allow him to explore what it meant to be king and his responsibilities to all the people that not only are in his country, but around the world. And the thing I love about Black Panther is that at the end of the movie, even though the villain was going about his plan the wrong way, he ultimately changes the hero for the better and convinces him to start doing all these outreach programs and to help the people in his community that aren't in Wakanda. And most of the heroes in Marvel are either just straight villains and they're forgettable, or if they try to make them like, oh, I'm doing something for altruistic needs, it's still just way over the top evil. And with this, it was like, you can see where Killmonger is coming from with what he's saying. And by the end of the movie, so does Black Panther. And that was, I just thought that was great writing to get that across in the movie.
100%. We have this conversation all the time on the show about the best villains in the MCU, which ones are generic, which ones are one-dimensional. Killmonger is not one of those people. He is absolutely one of the best villains they've ever done. Just because a lot of his, I say villains, but a lot of what he wanted to do was completely correct. We talk about wrestling here on the show a lot too, but it was like one of the, I feel like the best heels, as the old wrestling argument goes, have the right intentions, but they're just going about it the wrong way. And I think Killmonger could be included in that category. And we see that progress throughout the entire movie. His dad gets killed, and what he's trying to accomplish again is commendable. He's just going about it the wrong way. And I was going to save that for later, but we might as well just discuss it now. Killmonger, Phil, what were your thoughts on the Killmonger character and how he is one of the best parts of this movie and just the entire MCU as far as how they portrayed him and whatnot?
I thought his character arc was really cool. I thought how they decided to do it was insightful in this way that Killmonger's kind of like he's kind of the viewer's lens of Wakanda because he sees it in a very American way. And most viewers that, of course, in mainstream audience are Americans. So just seeing it from his viewpoint and seeing it as an African American man and not seeing it in this like rose-colored way that we're looking at it like, oh, this is this amazing fantasy, what do you call it, a utopia.
Yep.
And he's kind of looking at it like, nah, they don't care about us. Like, I'm right here, and they're not trying to help me at all. They abandoned me. And I think that was a really cool way to both ground Wakanda and create this fascinating character in Killmonger and in Jobu.
Do you think that's the biggest message coming out of this film? Because by the end of it, they have Wakanda go public. They're like, we're not going to just be stand by any longer. We're going to help, and we're going to do all this other stuff. And that's one of the post-credit scenes. Do you think that's the biggest message coming out of this movie, or is there? I mean, there's obviously a lot of things to learn and enjoy about this film, but is that the big takeaway, or is there something else that's probably even bigger than that?
I definitely think it's one of the biggest takeaways, and I think it was intentional to make a movie that's so centered around Black culture and centered around understanding where you come from and understanding your roots, and also understanding if you have privilege to reach back and help other people that might not be as privileged as you.
And they kind of do that as well with you mentioned the American aspect of it as well, and they kind of lean into that a little bit more with the Everett Ross character. And he's, I think, is he with the FBI? Is that what he is? I think he's with the FBI, right?
CIA, I think.
Yeah. So then there's that scene when they're interviewing Claw, and he is not that he's a dick to T'Challa, but he was like, I'll handle him. He's our property, blah blah blah. And then after he leaves, T'Challa made a remark about, or I don't know if it was him, but someone made a remark about how he was an American and how we're stuck up and stuff like that. So they kind of tease that theme throughout the entire movie, which again is really really well done. And it's not just a matter of, like with a lot of these movies, it's good versus evil. There's a lot of lessons to be learned here and how it can be applied to just everyday society in our world as it is right now. So it's a great movie in many, many different ways, but specifically from the messages that can be taken away from it. What about you, Chris? What were you think? What did you feel were the biggest takeaways and the strongest messages that you felt this film had kind of taught viewers and whatnot?
I mean, exactly what Phil said, just about recognizing privilege and using it to help those who are less privileged. But I also felt the movie just made it made a point of saying, like, obviously this is a nation that everybody views as a third world country, when in fact it's much more than that. And it's kind of a don't judge a book by its cover situation, where they're saying, like, you should never really underestimate anything you don't understand fully. And obviously Martin Freeman comes into this movie as kind of almost as the viewer, like he's the person being guided through Wakanda for the first time by Shuri. And so, like, we're experiencing all these new things through his eyes. And I thought it was smart because he is a Black Panther character from the comics. So it wasn't like they just randomly threw him in to keep the MCU connected. So it was a good use of his character. And yeah, I just felt like this movie, it was just like, you just came out of it feeling good for a number of different reasons.
Yeah, and I mean, also going back to Killmonger too and what he tried to accomplish, I like the fact, I wish he would have lived on, because there's so many villains that, so many bad guys in the MCU that they don't kill off and then we never see again. We've discussed this at length, Chris, in the MCU. But they kill off Killmonger, and, I would love to see him be brought back for a sequel or some other place in the MCU, and maybe that's still possible. I mean, they can bring back really whoever they want. But still, I mean, with the character itself, and they have this, I'm jumping all over the place here, but they have this great scene at the end, the final shot of Killmonger when he dies right in front of Black Panther, right in front of T'Challa. And he was like, listen, I don't want to be locked up. Why should I continue to live on or whatever? But he knows, like, they want to give him the proper treatment upon him passing away. Because I think T'Challa had asked him what he wanted to do, and he gave him his wishes, blah, blah, blah. But I just thought the way they handled that character, and it's not like he just blows up or something like that. With like a lot of these characters, a lot of these villains where they just shoot and kill, then it's over. And we'll talk about Andy Serkis' character, Ulysses Claw, in a second. But I thought even the way that they had written off the Killmonger character was really well done. Although part of me does wish they had kept him alive and maybe they could still bring him back because he was just that good of a character. Do you agree, Chris? Do you think they could have done more with the Killmonger character and keeping him alive, or do you think they wrote him off as perfectly as they possibly could?
Even though I don't like that all the villains in Marvel usually get killed off, I do think it was actually the right thing to do with his character, specifically because of the way he said it at the end when he's like, my ancestors who jumped over the boat that was taking them to America knew that it was better to die than to live in bondage. And it's like, I think that line was one of the more impactful lines in the movie, and from him to T'Challa as well. Like, you can tell that T'Challa really understood him in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like even though I would have loved to see Michael B. Jordan back because he's a great actor and it was awesome to see him get a role in a movie that was better than Fantastic Four. But it is what it is. There's always the possibility that through some of this multiverse craziness that they're going to do in Doctor Strange, that they find some way to bring Michael B. Jordan back in some capacity. But it would almost cheapen the importance of his death if they did that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. They can bring back anyone they want, but I feel like you definitely would cheapen it just because of how perfect the scene was. And there's so many great scenes in this movie, but I think that's one of the best parts is at the very end, that moment that T'Challa and Killmonger share. It's awesome. What about you, Phil? Do you feel that they wrote off the character of Killmonger as best as they could, or do you feel like they could have done something better than what they did?
Well, I honestly don't feel like they wrote him off. I feel like there are plenty of chances to see him again.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there was this theme throughout the movie that kind of like death is only the beginning. Even when they were taking a heart-shaped herb, you always had to bury them so they could go back to the ancestral plane and then come back. So there's always a way to use Killmonger again, I feel like, especially because he took the herb. Whether that be in some kind of like ancestral way. I'm not saying he's going to end up on the ancestral plane, but there's always a way that his embodiment can end up somewhere else, or we could see him in some kind of vision or something else later. But as far as his death, I felt like his death was very impactful. I felt like the way they did it was perfect. The line is one of the most stirring lines throughout the entire movie. And I was kind of annoyed because somebody spoiled the line before I saw it. So I was kind of annoyed when I saw it.
Also, did they spoil his death too?
No. Somebody had just...
Okay. I was going to say, I was like, damn, that sucks.
Yeah, at the time I posted something and somebody posted that line and I was like, I hope that's not a line from the movie. So when I was looking at the movie, I was like, God damn it.
That's the thing. Yeah, someone spoiled the Han Solo death from Force Awakens for me before I went to go see that the day of. There's these people on the internet when you say like, oh, I'm going to see Black Panther today, or oh, I'm going to go see Star Wars, or I'm going to go see an Endgame or something. There's always people in the comments, specifically on Twitter. Though this happened to me on Facebook, I got it spoiled for me, and I was fucking pissed. I was so mad about that. We all know it was going to happen, but when you get confirmation of it, that's even worse. So, gotta hate people who spoil shit. But no, I agree. So, Phil, kind of going off of that, do you feel if they were to bring back the Killmonger character, again, I'm speaking in wrestling terms here, but would it be, you said it could be in like a vision or something like that, which I think would be really cool. Do you think it would be as a face, or do you think he would continue on, be brought back as a heel? Because I think the former might be the better option to take here with his character.
I think there's a good way to try to do a storyline in a way that he found peace in death. Almost like when they brought his dad back in that in his scene where he took the herb.
That's
And
a
it
good
was
point.
kind of
Yeah.
like his dad did things that he believed in, but you could tell that at the end of it, he was like, "No, you're going the wrong direction. You know, I've figured this out now because I did it too."
Yeah, no, actually, that's a great point. I didn't really think about that, but yeah, if they were to do a vision like that, whether it be in the second movie or in a different movie, I think that'd be super impactful as well. So that's a great point. We've gone this far without talking about Sherry, and we got to bring her up because I think she was a very important part of this film as well. I thought she was great, specifically with the chemistry that she had with T'Challa throughout the entire movie. Produced a lot of memes coming out of it. I remember that very clearly coming out of this film. But Chris, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts on the role that Sherry played in this film and the chemistry that she had with T'Challa throughout?
I mean, she was a great character, and I know that in the comics they reversed the roles a little bit in the movie. Shuri is the more traditional one in the comics, and T'Challa is the scientist. But I actually really liked that they switched that up a little bit here because it allowed Shuri to not only be like the smartest person on the planet, but it also gave her, I think, a little more freedom to be that sarcastic, almost rebellious character, which she wouldn't have been had she been in the role of the traditional, like, I follow all of my ancestors' rules kind of character. So I like how they did that a lot. And then I also really liked that they set her up as being, like, because by the time you get to Avengers, and she's, like, almost making fun of the fact that they couldn't figure out a better way to program Vision's brain, like, you just see in that moment that she is miles ahead of even Tony Stark.
Yeah,
so I felt like this movie did a great job establishing her as not only the comic relief in the movie to some degree, because T'Challa is not a funny character.
Yeah.
So, and Marvel needs to get a few laughs out of its movies. So it was awesome to see that dynamic shifted where instead of the hero being the person with all the quips, it got to be not the sidekick, but like his sister, who's the one designing all his stuff. She's also the one giving him the most shit throughout the movie.
Yeah. No, I thought I thought they struck a perfect balance here, because you're right, because she is, of all the characters in the film, probably the most comic relief, as you had mentioned, but she can be serious at times too. She is as smart, if not smarter, than Tony Stark and many of the other characters in the MCU, which is why I really hope they use her more going forward, because she can be a very valuable asset. We saw some of those interactions at the end of Infinity War, and obviously very briefly in Endgame when the big battle scene happened at the end. But I think she's a great character, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of her in the future because she's just that good. Again, because I think she hit that balance of being funny, likable, and also being serious when she needed to, specifically at the end when it came to the big battle scene in this movie as well. What about you, Phil? How did you feel about the Shuri character and how she came across here?
I thought Shuri was one of several black women in the movie that just came across really well. I mean, she came across really confident and very smart. It was never like she was doing anything just out of anger, or it's never seemed like her motivation was out of spite or anything, because you see that a lot from black women in movies. So it was it was always cool to see that she was, always forward thinking, always a step ahead of even like the main character sometimes.
Yeah. No, I think they did a great job with that specifically. And you make actually a great point there, because not just Shuri, but literally as far as I can remember from just watching it an hour ago, every female character in this movie comes across really, really well. And one of my biggest gripes with the early MCU movies, and I've told Chris this before, that I felt like, especially in Phase 1, a little bit in Phase 2, I felt like not every female character, because like Peggy Carter was a great example of how they handled someone very, very well, and obviously that ended up paying off because they kept her around, and she's now with Captain America by the end of Endgame. But it just feels like a lot of the female characters early on in the MCU are just there to be love interests for the main male superhero. But we don't see that at all in this film, and I thought that was awesome. It's not the first film to do that. I'm trying to think of another movie I know there was another movie that Chris and I reviewed that didn't do that, but this was one of them, and I thought that was really, really well done. Would you agree, Chris, that with all the female characters in this movie, that I thought they did just a tremendous job of having everyone come across really, really well, come across as smart, just a badass in many different scenes, specifically that Was it the club scene? That Claw was there. They just came across as just super badass, and that's the one that I'm thinking about. Would you agree that they just did a great job of handling and having all these women come across really, really well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Angela Bassett wasn't in the movie very much, but like the few minutes that she had in the movie, she did a great job playing her character. But there were several times in the movie where Lupita Nyong'o and Denai Guerrera like stole the show. I was so excited when I heard Denai Guerrera got cast in this movie because I was such a big fan of her in The Walking Dead.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew she could handle like all the badass action stuff and all the serious lines, and like even she gets a couple funny lines. Like you'd be like, you froze when you saw her. Like she gives them a little bit of shit too. But at the end of the day, she's the most dedicated person in the movie because she's willing to fight the love of her life to save her country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Nakia, like, she's not even really a love interest. Like, clearly Black Panther loves her,
mm-hmm.
but her role in the movie isn't to be the woman he loves.
Exactly.
It's to be the woman that saves his life.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that at the end of the movie, there's still no, like, oh, maybe we'll date again kind of vibe. Like, there didn't need to be. Like, these were fully formed characters who, in my opinion, if they're going to do a sequel, that's who they need to focus on, the women of Wakanda, because they did a great job setting them up in this movie.
Yeah, I think it's pretty evident too when you watch a scene like in Infinity War, or I think it was in Endgame. They specifically had all the women in one scene, but they had part of that too in Infinity War. It wasn't all the female characters, but it was a bunch of them, like Scarlet Witch, who comes across fairly well for the most part. I thought they stole the show. I mean, in their participation of in that battle in Wakanda, they thought they were the best part about it. Which I don't know if it's to say that it makes the other female superheroes they have look weak. It just makes them look that much better because they came across amazingly well. They were portrayed very well in this film, and I thought that was excellent. Got to give a shout out to, we got to talk about M'Baku and how great he was. We don't see a lot of him. Obviously, we see him at the very beginning and then again at the end. But I thought the role that he played was really, really well done. I'll ask you, Phil, how did you feel about M'Baku's role in Black Panther and how he kind of ended up aligning himself with T'Challa and ended up making, again, in wrestling terms, the full face turn by the end there?
I thought M'Baku was fantastic. Of course, I was a little bit scared when I first saw it because I was like, okay, M'Baku's going to play a guy in a gorilla suit, which I never thought they were going to put him in a gorilla suit like they have him in the comic. But when I first saw it, I was like, okay. But then I was like, okay, but Coogler would never let this be anything weird or problematic. So I was like, okay, what are they going to do with him? So they kind of didn't use him in a villain role like I expected, even though he kind of had a villain role at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I felt like everything he did was really impactful. I mean, even his challenge was one of the highlights of the movie. His kind of face turn, like you said, when he revealed that he had T'Challa's body was fantastic, but because it was kind of like, no, I remember he spared my life, and so I owe him.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and even when you get him coming back later in Endgame, it's all full circle.
Yep.
So yeah, I think he's a fantastic character. I definitely hope they do more with him in the future.
Yeah, I really hope they do. I think my only nitpick of the character in the movie was the fact that we didn't see him a whole ton. He's just really, really good, and I'm really glad they gave him more screen time in Infinity War in the Battle of Wakanda at that point. You had mentioned, that thankfully they didn't go down that route by putting him in a gorilla suit and making it very problematic. That would have been incredibly stupid. Was there anything about the movie that you did feel that, okay, I would have changed this bothered me, this annoyed me, or do you think by and large they did everything very, very well?
No, I mean, in comparison to a lot of black superhero stuff that we've gotten in the past, this felt very authentic, and I think it's because you had black creators behind it. You had black writer on it, black directors. I mean, even all the costume design and everything was black creators. So I never felt like anything was, contrived. I never felt like they were pandering.
Yeah.
It all felt very authentic.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's definitely that was one of my big takeaways from the movie, how authentic it came across and how it was just great overall. Just they did a great job of just everything. And I think having, like you had mentioned, black writers, and stuff like that is definitely imperative when it comes to stuff like this. And they did justice by it 100%. What about you, Chris, and how the M'Baku character came across? Was he one of the highlights of the film for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, Winston Duke did a great job playing M'Baku, and I was glad to see that they brought him back in Avengers, even just for a little scene, because it shows that, like, him and T'Challa are almost, like, co-leading their people now. Like, he was there next to T'Challa, almost being portrayed as, like, on the equal level of him. So it was cool to see that, but, like, I never really viewed him as a villain in the movie at all. Like, they made it clear through that opening narration that there was that fifth tribe who went up into the mountains, and then they come down and he's taking his right, to fight for the crown. He fails and he goes back home, and then they go to him for help, and he helps them later. He fucks with them a little bit by pretending he's going to eat them before revealing they're vegetarians.
That was great.
But, like, yeah, I didn't feel like anything with his character didn't work. The only thing I felt like was a little pushed in the movie was T'Challa's best friend, W'Kabi. I felt like his turn on T'Challa was too quick. Like,
I agree.
That's your best friend since childhood, and all of a sudden, like, he fails to catch the criminal one time, and you're like, oh, I thought things would be different from you, and then all of a sudden he's, like, fully on board Killmonger's plan. Like, there should have been at least one or two scenes of Killmonger talking to those people to convince them that his way was the right way, to give a little bit more gravity to his heel turn, I guess, even though at the end of the movie he puts down his weapon because he doesn't want to fight Okoye's wife or just his girlfriend. I don't know, but
yeah, I think it's his wife. I don't know if they made that clear or not.
Yeah, they just made it clear that they were together, but not in what capacity. But the only other thing that I felt like the movie could have avoided was the big CGI at the end. Like, there was parts of that scene on the train, like the train tracks fight, where it looked like a Mortal Kombat 2 cutscene. Like, and I really wish that they would have had a more personal, visceral fight between T'Challa and Killmonger, instead of having, like, CGI rhinos with armor, which I get are from the comics and are really cool and everything, but I don't think that this movie needed a big army versus army scene at the end. And it would have been better had it just been Black Panther and Killmonger talking to each other while they're fighting like they were in that scene. And without all the extra CGI shit, because there were points where it just did not look good.
Yeah, well, no, you make a good point too, especially with, like, the quickness of the W'Kabi turn on, aligning with Killmonger and whatnot. And I was fearful that he was going to die, that he was just going to be like, oh, I'm following Killmonger, blah, 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 or that he was going to get killed or something. And thankfully he didn't, which was a pleasant surprise. And I probably should have figured that out by, 2 hours in. The movie's great. They probably wouldn't do something that silly, but thankfully he's still alive and whatnot. But yeah, no, that was probably. Do you think that was another criticism? You mentioned his quick turn. How easy it was for Killmonger to be like, yeah, just go attack everybody, and they just kind of, not everyone listened to him. Obviously, the women didn't, but the giant army did. Do you think that was something that could have fleshed out a little more with them showing more resistance before they, followed his orders? But then again, also earlier on in the movie, they make it quite clear, we're going to do whatever, whoever's in charge, we're just going to do whatever they tell us to do, because that's just what the king does. I mean, usually they know right. So do you think that was another criticism as well, that they could have done a better job of showing more resistance on the part of the army without just doing really whatever we asked in that moment when it came to that, when it came to that final battle and whatever?
Yeah, and I get that they didn't want to overbloat the movie with too much, but it just would have been nice for there to be at least one scene of him addressing the people in a way that actually converts some of them to his way of thinking, because otherwise it seems like they're all just blindly following him. And there was one scene with Okoye where she seemed conflicted but was still like, he's the king now, I have to do this, because that's what I've committed myself to. It would have been nice to see that from more people. I don't know if her having those lines was enough to justify how many people just quickly decided to side with this guy who wanted to start a war.
Yeah. It seemed like only really.
But it's a small criticism in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. No, it's not. Yeah, it's not really that big of a deal. It seemed like only really the main characters kind of caught on to that. But yeah, again, overall, I mean, the scene's great. It's a very minor nitpicky thing. But yeah, no, I totally agree. But when we talk about like bad guys and stuff like that, we mentioned how M'Baku had kind of come across as a villain very briefly early on. Obviously, he wasn't the big bad in the villain in the movie. Killmonger was. But you also have Ulysses Klaue, who we haven't really talked a whole lot about. He is in. I thought he was in the movie less than he actually was. I hadn't seen it in a while before I rewatched it this morning. I thought he was only in it for like a very brief period. Like, I don't know if have you seen the 2014 Godzilla movie with Bryan Cranston in it? That movie from a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And how Bryan Cranston's in it for like 20 minutes, maybe. And they center the entire franchise, the entire like promotion of the film around him. I thought he was going to last very quick, but he was actually in a decent part of the movie. Was Andy Serkis, and we've talked about him before, Chris, about how great, of an actor he is, and I had wished they had done more with him when we'd seen him in Ultron, and I was very happy they brought him back for this movie because I thought he was really good. I was a little disappointed they killed him off when they did. I was hoping he would be around for a little longer, but Phil, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts on the role of Klaue in the film and Andy Serkis' performance of that character?
I thought he did a good job of doing just kind of like a lot of manicness that we see from Klaue in the comics, because Klaue in the comic is kind of like nuts. So it's like in the movie, he's never taken anything really serious. He's always kind of like, he's kind of manic. And I think that's just that's a testament to how good Andy Serkis is with the material he was given, because he wasn't given a ton of material, but I felt like he came across as such a full-formed character in the scenes that he was in. I do think they could have done more with him before they killed him off. But I think the way that they used his death worked really well. Because just the scene of Killmonger dragging his body into Wakanda is just so badass that it's kind of like, I don't like that they killed him, but just what they did with it was really interesting.
Yeah, it was worth it probably for that moment alone. I wish they had done more with him, but that one scene by itself is awesome. And he came across as a total... Like, if you weren't already sold on Killmonger, which I think you got to be sold on him after that initial museum scene, which was so good. And then if you weren't sold on him for whatever reason beyond that, I think you were when he had killed a Klaue and dragged his body onto Wakanda, because that was pretty cool. But you had mentioned, what was the one thing that I wanted to bring up with Klaue? Oh, and how manic he was. He was singing at one point when they were interrogating him, which was great. I love when they were right during the club scene, right before that big fight had ensued. Everett Ross was like, "Oh, you got a SoundCloud something or whatever, it's something along those lines, or an entourage. Like, when's your SoundCloud
you got a mixtape coming out?
Mixtape, that's what it was. Yeah, and he was actually taking it seriously. He's like, "Oh yeah, send him the YouTube link or something like that."
Yeah,
I thought that was great. That was probably for me. My favorite part of the whole movie was that fight scene during that initial the club fight scene, which we'll get to in a moment. I'll ask you guys what your favorite scenes were. But before we get to that, Chris, what were your thoughts on Andy Serkis' Klaue and how they did or didn't use him in this movie?
I mean, Andy Serkis is great, and it's awesome whenever you get to see him act outside of a CGI suit. And for that reason alone, I'm a little sad that he was dead. But like you guys were saying, like the scene of Killmonger dragging his body back to Wakanda, like just kind of establishes how badass he is. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen Andy Serkis stick around, because I feel like he could be one of those minor villains who just pops in and out that, like that's sort of what happens in the comics. These villains come and go. Would have been nice to have that with somebody for once. Kind of like how, I know you haven't seen them yet, Graham, but Phil, have you seen like the Marvel Netflix shows for the most part?
Yeah, I haven't seen the last season of some of them, but yeah, for the most part.
So,
yeah.
Like, he could have been like Turk, because Turk shows up in every freaking season of every show, and like he's always funny, but he's not really that intimidating because all the different heroes pretty much just use him for whatever they need him for at the time. And I felt like Andy Serkis could have been that to the movies. Like, he could have been the bad version of Agent Coulson. Like, he just pops up to screw with somebody's plan once in a while and then slinks back off into the darkness. But, yeah, I felt like he did a great job in this movie, just playing, like, a fun-loving villain, because he looks like he's having a great time the whole time he's in this movie.
Does. Yeah,
like, even when they're, like, running out of the club, and he's
just
like,
about
that
to say.
was awesome, that was awesome.
Say, yeah.
Then he's like, put some music on. As the chase scene, like, it was fun to see a villain having fun, which you don't see very often.
No, definitely not. I was literally just about to say before you said that, when he screams, "This is awesome," coming out of the club. I thought I was watching a wrestling show for a second. I thought he said it like 3 times, but no, that was great. So I'll transition from there into what I was going to ask you guys next. Chris, I'll start with you. Your favorite scenes from the movie? Because my favorite, I mean, the whole movie is great, again, but mine was the Fight Club scene type thing when they're in the club and just all hell ensues. And not only that, but like the way that it was shot, because there's 2 different levels of the building, and I was taking a film class a couple of years ago, and we actually watched the scene in our class because of how of a great example it was of how you take a shot from like a fight scene taking place on the 2nd floor of a building, and it was all open, so they could clearly just move the camera from one spot to the other, like seamlessly. It was awesome. And then there's another shot of Killmonger. This wasn't that same scene, when I think it's right after he becomes king. And it's like this rotation shot where it starts like upside down, and then it gets to like, it's hard to explain, but I thought that shot was really well done too. And the filmography in this movie is just fantastic. But specifically for me, that club scene was just great with how it was shot. Claw's role there, T'Challa, the women, everybody, I thought was just great. What about you, Chris? What were some of your favorite scenes in the entire movie?
I think my individual favorite scene was probably when he goes to the spirit plane and tells his ancestors, like, you were wrong, because that's the moment you realize, like, wow, Killmonger actually got through to him. And it was just like, I almost didn't expect it, like, to see him almost berate his father like that, like, because you know how much he loves his father. They did a great job establishing that connection. So to see him almost be angry for all those generations of people allowing all that suffering to happen, like, that was such a powerful moment for the character. And then just the few minutes at the end with them watching the sunset and almost coming to terms with each other as cousins, like it was the small moments in this movie that I think stood out to me more than the big action sequences, even though that Fight Club scene was awesome.
Yeah, no,
nightclub scene, yeah. But yeah, I felt like this movie, the way it was written, the little moments meant more to the characters than the big moments, and that's what I really liked.
Definitely, absolutely impactful. And I think, as you guys have mentioned several times, the character arcs of not just one person, because the character arcs of, any one individual, like an Iron Man, over the course of 20 movies is great. But like in this one movie alone, we get the character arc for just mastered for so many different characters, aside from just T'Challa, aside from just Black Panther, which I think is one thing among many things, this movie does exceptionally well. What about you, Phil? What were some of your favorite scenes from the movie and what you thought they did the best out of everything in this film?
Of course, like the when Killmonger comes and challenges T'Challa in the throne room is a really great scene. Just all of the acting in that scene is great. When Killmonger finally reveals that he's Wakandan, and he says his real name, and then that transitions into the challenge, and he just wipes the floor with T'Challa, completely wipes the floor with him. And I mean, "Is this your king?" is still one of the best lines in the entire movie.
Yeah,
and just chucking him off a cliff. And then, like you said, then from there going to him burning the garden, and that awesome scene of it rotating as he walked into the throne room and sat down. Just that whole part of the movie is just amazing.
Yeah, that scene too, when he just flat out squashes T'Challa and throws him off the cliff. Literally in that same scene when Zuri comes forward and he's like, don't, he had nothing to do with this. I was the one that killed your father. And he's like, all right, I don't give a fuck. And he just kills him anyway. Literally within seconds. It's not like, oh man, like I'm conflicted. Like he's like, nope, I don't give a shit. And he just kills him. And I love, what's that actor's name? Forrest Whitaker. I love that guy. I liked him in, he was in one of the Star Wars movies recently. I think Rogue One, but he was also in
it was Rogue One.
Rogue One. He was in a movie called Vantage Point a while ago, like a decade ago, that I really liked him in. He's great. So I thought that part of it was cool too. It's one of those tired tropes. They're like, oh man, do I not do it? Do I do it or whatever? He just flat out kills him, and no one gives a shit aside from T'Challa.
And he even calls him like Uncle something because he remembers him as a kid.
Yeah.
And I forget what his name, what his fake name was in America before.
James.
Okay, Uncle James. That's right. That part right there, like it almost made me laugh because I was like, "Oh shit, he actually remembers this guy from when he was a little kid." Like, just that little detail of like reminding you that he knows exactly who this guy is, and yeah, that was so funny.
It was great. It was funny, and it was like, shit. Like, I can't believe they did that. Like, in a good way. I thought that was great. Again, the whole thing is awesome. This is more of a side thing, but I think another thing this movie does so well of, such a good job of, and we've talked before, Chris, about in these movies, the incorporation of certain music and whatever. Like, obviously, AC/DC is synonymous with Iron Man, and there's not, like, one song that stands out in Black Panther, but just the overall feel and the atmosphere of the film I thought was fantastic, and it makes you feel like you're in Wakanda at several points, and not just the way that they use music and the certain points that they put it into, and just the way that Wakanda looks, the visuals of this movie. I do agree that the CGI of that fight between Killmonger and Black Panther didn't have to be on a bus. I agree with that. That's just nitpicking. But the visuals overall in this movie I thought were just amazing. Would you say the same, Phil, with how the visuals came across and the soundtrack as well, and how much it enhanced your either enjoyment or just overall feel for the movie?
Yeah, there were several parts where there was a lot of CG, and I feel like the music and the sound in it just enhanced it, and it almost made you like forget about how some of it looked artificial. Like when we first see Wakanda and they have like the blaring trumpets when they first came in, that part is amazing. Even the throne room scene when Killmonger's walking in, I think that's one of the coolest songs off of the soundtrack. And there's another scene where I thought the music. When T'Challa jumps off of the car and he smashes the other car and it cuts back into the main theme was really amazing.
Yeah. There's a lot of scenes like that. There's a lot of scenes where the music really, it would be a great scene anyway, but I think, like I had said, it really enhances it 10 times. It's just the way they put it in, and the way, just the music they use in general is very good. What about you, Chris, as far as the soundtrack and the visuals are concerned?
Oh, it's a beautiful movie, especially that first scene when they fly through the little barrier and you see the city for the first time. Just, there's all these little moments in the movie where they have this great score in the background and then these beautiful visuals. And I think that's a testament to Ryan Coogler as a director. And I don't know whoever did the cinematography on this, but whoever did it, they should have gotten an award too, because it really was, like, up until that third act with some of the CGI that I didn't think looked very good, I thought everything in this movie looked beautiful. Even the chase scene when T'Challa's like jumping from cars to buildings, like I thought that looked good. As good as it can. Like you can't make that look realistic because it's not realistic. So you accept a certain level of fakery, but I felt like they pulled it off as well as they could in that scene. And then in the scene where they're like, specifically when they're falling together before they hit the train tracks, like that to me, it looked like Blade 2 level of CGI. And like Blade 2 has some shitty CGI.
Yes, it does.
So yeah, but like other than that, like the score of this movie was incredible, and whoever they got to do it did an amazing job. And I hope if they do decide to move forward with a sequel in some capacity that they keep the same crew together, because clearly all these people were like a fucking filmmaking Voltron and just came up with like all the right ingredients to make this movie what it was.
Yeah, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. I mean, this movie is great as it is, and I really hope they don't change course with anyone as far as the actors or even the behind the scenes people, like you said, the music people, the people that made the visuals possible, because just it worked so well. I would hate to see them go in a completely different direction for the second movie, whenever that might be coming out in the next couple of years. But yeah, there was something else you had mentioned that I wanted to ask you about as far as CGI, the music. Man, I forgot what else I was going to ask you, but oh yeah, here it was. So in watching the movie back again recently, Chris, I'll start with you. Is there anything that you noticed? Again, we talked about Ant-Man and the Wasp recently, and that podcast isn't out yet because this came before Ant-Man and the Wasp, but we talked about it recently, and how there were more takeaways that you had and more things you noticed or liked. For me, I actually, as much as I liked this movie when it came out 2 years ago, I think I like it even more now upon watching it again. And even this isn't even including Boseman's passing just yesterday. I think not even including that, the movie is still so great, and not only does it stand the test of time, it's even better than I remember it being, which is saying a lot because it was great when it came out 2 years ago. But with this movie, was there anything you noticed or anything you liked more about the movie upon watching it again just recently, Chris?
I wouldn't say there was anything I noticed different this time around, like with Ant-Man 2, but I definitely think it's one of those movies that it's going to hold up for a long time. And I think that's one of Marvel's strengths is if you liked one of their movies, you can go back and watch any of the movies from the MCU now and it'll still hold up against the current stuff. And it's going to be hard for them to move forward with this franchise, but I hope that they find a creative and satisfying way to do it, because there's so many characters from this movie that just need to keep going. Like I said it before, like they should make a sequel, just the women of Wakanda, and it should be like Okoye, Nakia, and Shuri just doing some badass shit together. Like that would be awesome. And if they do something like that, they don't even necessarily have to have T'Challa killed off. They can still say he's the king of Wakanda and he's out doing his humanitarian thing, and they're at home, keeping the door locked. So, or have him promote M'Baku, like make that guy earn his spot as king, and use Winston Duke because he's a great actor. And frankly, like, out of all the characters in the movie, Winston Duke is the most physically imposing dude. So, like, that's a tool. Use that. Like, make him not the new Black Panther, but make him something new and different, and somebody who's just badass in a different way. But I love this movie, and I'm glad we got to talk about it. It just sucks that it had to be under such circumstances, because you can't replace Chadwick Boseman. Like at this point, recasting him isn't an option.
No, yeah, that's definitely not going to happen. We'll just say that right out of the gate. There's no way they're recasting him. They're definitely
there'd be an uproar. It would be chaos.
No, that's not happening. There's no way. No one can play the role better than he did. With this movie and all the other movies he had appeared in the MCU. Absolutely, they are going to keep the characters going and stuff like that. I'm sure of it. I mean, this movie was so successful and so well received. They are, and it's not a matter of making the second movie just because it was announced or just because it's going to make money. Like, who gives a shit about that stuff? I think it's more a matter of honoring his legacy. And they're, like you had mentioned, they're still in pre-production, so it's not like, as far as we know, I have no clue. I don't work there, but like they filmed some scenes and whatever. I have no clue. I don't know if they could do like what they did with, God, I'm drawing a blank here. Carrie Fisher with Princess Leia in the Star Wars movies, or again, I don't know how different the process was. What'd you say?
I hope they don't.
No, yeah, I hope they don't either.
I don't want to see a CGI Chadwick from deleted scenes. Like
I think that just
I understand why that might. I understand why some people might actually be happy with that, but yeah, I don't want them to do that, especially even for a cameo, just because it's it sets a dangerous precedent for what they can do with dead actors.
Yeah, and I think there'd be a lot of backlash towards that as well. So I would hope they don't do that. And then like I know like they don't have to kill him off. It's not even like oh we already know like the outcome of the second movie. We have no clue. We have no idea what they're going to do. There has been no set plot, no set direction. Even in light of recent events, we have no clue what they're going to do with this movie.
And we won't for a while. Like
it's
going to be a long process because they're essentially going to have to start from scratch now with whatever they're planning.
Yeah, with whatever they're planning. And I honestly hope they don't kill him off. I hope they can find a way to have him continue to live on, just we don't see him. This is a different scenario, but like with the Fast and Furious movies, I think they'd already filmed some scenes with Paul Walker before he passed when he did. But he didn't.
Most of them, yeah.
But he didn't die in the movie. They just had him ride off, and which was one of the. I'm not even the biggest Fast and Furious fan, and I almost basically cried at that scene. I mean, I'm not really sure how you could be a human being and not, but they could do something similar to that. I mean, again, they haven't filmed any scenes with him for this, so I would hope they don't do a CGI type shit, whatever. That's a different discussion for a different day. But as far as keeping the characters going, this franchise has so much potential. Not just with Black Panther himself, but also just with all the other characters in this film. It has such a great cast, and just the overall feel of it too, which I think is one of the more important things. It's so much different than any MCU movie. Like I don't watch this movie and think to myself, although that we are doing an MCU podcast, I don't think to myself, this is a Marvel movie or like this is an MCU movie. It's so much more than just that, and that's a big part of what makes this movie so great. And, Phil, you were mentioning before how you went to go see the movie with your dad. This is a movie where, unlike a lot of the movies in the MCU, it appeals to so many different people that aren't even superhero fans. And that's what I think makes this movie so cool. You don't have to be like a big comic book fan or a big superhero fan to enjoy Black Panther. And I think that's a big part of its legacy and Chadwick's legacy and whatnot to make this movie as great as it was. And hopefully we could see more of that with the second one and whatever they continue to do with these characters in the future. But with you, Phil, your thoughts overall on Black Panther and how they could handle this stuff moving forward in a nutshell.
My thought overall is I still think it's aged really well. I've seen it so many times. I've seen it more times than I can count. Mm-hmm. And every time I see it, I notice something that I missed. Like last time I watched it, I noticed some of the political commentary that I missed before. Like there's a conversation that W'Kabi and T'Challa have about refugees that's very interesting. And I think the timing of it, there's no way that it wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
And just the conversation they had about refugees and T'Challa kind of knowing that he already took a refugee in Bucky is interesting as well. And I mean, I think just going back to what you guys said earlier about W'Kabi, there's certain things that you could kind of see that they had already planted seeds, that they were having philosophical differences early in the movie. I do think they could have handled it better, but there's certain things about their characters that I noticed early on. Every time I see it, that it's kind of like, oh yeah, you guys don't agree as much as you're making it seem.
Yeah.
And it was something else that I noticed that W'Kabi did earlier. I forgot what it was. It might have been in a scene with Okoye, where it was kind of like, oh yeah, you're not really as into T'Challa being king as you think. Because I think the other part that's interesting with their relationship is, it kind of shows like, yeah, we're best friends, and I'm great with our relationship being this way. But once you're king, that's a different relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that works really well throughout the entire movie is just how everyone looks at T'Challa differently when he becomes king. Yeah. And just how his role as Black Panther changes when he becomes king.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Definitely. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. It's okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I was just going to mention basically what you had just mentioned, Phil, and also what Chris had referenced as well earlier. I just wanted to say this real quick about how it is cool how they kind of decipher the two different things, how being a king is different than being Black Panther. I think when they were having that meeting about Claw and how someone had to go stop him or whatever, one of the women had said, we don't need a warrior right now, we need a king. And it's two very different roles that he plays, and we see kind of the burden that it has on him. and how abruptly this all happens, because of course it wasn't like, oh, you're now the king, you're Black Panther, blah, blah, blah. It's because his dad passed away when he did, so suddenly in Civil War. It's kind of thrust upon him so suddenly, so it was a very nice attention to detail as far as that concerned. But I'm sorry, Phil, do you have any more thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and so when they show the replay, the flashback from Civil War, the thing I never realized also, when you're looking at Wakanda as a country, and you're looking at T'Challa come back as king, and it goes back to what M'Baku said to him at the beginning, is he kind of just came back in and he took the throne and he was ready to just go along with business, and everybody else is like, no, somebody else from America killed our king. Mm-hmm. Are you just going to let them do that? Mm-hmm. And I think that's also part of why some of them were rolling with Killmonger, because they were like, nah, they killed our king. And it might have been not America as a country, but someone from America killed their king.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I actually never really thought about it like that until you just brought it up right now. That's a reason why I think it's a big reason to why that you should watch this movie multiple times. There's so many layers to this film and more things to understand than just what's on the surface. Actually, well, that's a really good point. So I'm gonna have to watch it again just to see the more commentary as far as that is concerned, because that's really insightful. Any more thoughts on that type of stuff, Chris?
I just what Phil is saying makes perfect sense. I just feel like if they had included one scene of Killmonger talking to the people and the people expressing that sentiment a little more, it would have made so much more sense that he had amassed following by the end of the movie. But yeah, it is laid in there subtly, and that is what makes rewatching the movie so cool, is you can catch all that different stuff, and it makes the movie more rewatchable, because there are some movies in the MCU where it's like once you've seen it, you know what happened.
Yeah.
Iron Man 2 is not a deep movie. You don't need to rewatch it a million times to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
This is a deep movie that has multiple messages that can frankly be lost if you're watching it for the first time in, say, a movie theater. All the sensory overload that an action movie and a Marvel movie gives you can maybe shut your brain down a little bit. And then when you see it on your home television, you're looking for all the small details, and that stuff starts to stick out. So yeah, this movie is incredibly rewatchable. And I just watched it again this morning, not just for this podcast, but because I was like, it's obviously his most famous role, so it'd be nice to see that. But what's awesome is it won't be the last time he plays him. He did get to voice the character for an upcoming cartoon that
cool.
They're producing called What If, which is based on a series of comics that sort of look at alternate versions of characters.
Oh, right.
So it's
on Disney Plus, right?
So it's right. So one of the episodes will be what if Peggy Carter was given the serum instead of Steve? Mm-hmm. I don't know what T'Challa's storyline will be in there, but it'll be interesting to see how Disney decides to pay homage to him with that episode, because there is going to be a Black Panther episode, and he did already get to do the voice.
That's cool. I knew about the episode. I knew about the show. I didn't know that he was a part of an episode, so that's fucking cool to hear. Could it be maybe that someone else ended up being Black Panther instead of him? I mean, I guess that might be just too obvious. That's probably going to be something else, I would assume, right?
I don't know. I'm looking at the page right now, and I think, Jesus Christ, if what I'm reading is right, it's possible that he gets kidnapped instead of Peter Quill, and T'Challa becomes Star-Lord.
Holy shit, that's going to be interesting.
Okay,
I'm on board.
I'm on the Wikipedia page, so who knows how reliable that this is, but it says Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa / Star-Lord, so
interesting.
Take that how you will, but that almost makes me more curious to see it.
Most definitely. Wow, that's really nice to hear. I did not know that he was a part of something else before he had passed, so that's amazing. There's no Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't believe he had filmed any other movies that are unreleased, except for one. He plays a trumpet player in a movie was supposed to be already out, but was pushed back.
Okay.
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is what it's called, and looks like Viola Davis is the main character in it.
Oh, okay.
So that'll be like his last live action thing, but this voice role, because it'll probably come out after that, will, I think, be the last thing in his filmography.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it probably won't be out for a while because I know they already have not Captain America, the Bucky Winter Soldier show, whatever, with Falcon. They have, what's it called, WandaVision coming out. And I don't know if that was supposed to come out by the end of 2020 or early 2021. That's cool. They already recorded a ton of stuff for it, so that's nice. Even though I don't think it's supposed to be up for a while. So we might not be seeing that episode until like mid-2021. And that's not even considering more potential production delays and stuff like that. So we'll see. We'll see. One quick thing before we wrap up, though, I do want to mention this. I was very happy that they did not bring in Bucky until the very end. And I'm a Bucky fan, but I'm glad they didn't just throw him in there for in the war for like literally no reason. He just was involved in the very end post-credit scene. You get him ready for Infinity War, and that's the first full-length role that we get him in since Civil War 2 years earlier. So I think this movie's timing, too, is great. It was right before Infinity War. It was the perfect preview. And we've said this before, Chris, 2017, Marvel, and all the movies are good to great to amazing. 2017, though, might have been their strongest year ever. Between Ragnarok, before that you had Homecoming, before that you had Guardians 2, all three amazing films. Then you have Black Panther, and then you have Infinity War, and then it kind of drops off with Ant-Man and the Wasp, but that's another podcast that we're doing in a couple of weeks. But it really kept that momentum going. Like, you see this movie, and it's been 2 years since you had last seen Black Panther and Civil War, but it feels like no time has passed whatsoever. It doesn't feel like, oh, they lost the momentum, like the movie should have come out a lot earlier. It doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like the perfect way to lead in to an equally entertaining movie in Infinity War, like literally 2 months later. And the box office for this movie was unreal. Like, the movie was still in theaters when Infinity War came out 2-3 months later, which is crazy. But would you agree, Chris, they made the right move by not including Bucky here until the literal very end?
Yeah, and I thought the one scene from Shuri where she's like, "Great, another broken white boy to fix," was that made me laugh so hard.
Was that in this movie, or was that at the end, or was
Yeah, when they're bringing Ross back after he's been shot.
Oh, right. Yes.
And she's like, "Oh, great, you brought me another broken white boy to fix." It's like, she's talking about Bucky.
Yeah.
So it's just that was really funny to me. I mean, I was wondering why they didn't have Bucky in it so much, but, he might have still been in his little cryo thing for all we know, or whatever they stuck him in.
Yeah, I assume that was the case, because I'm assuming they never really say, oh, it's 2017. It just says present day. I assume it takes place this movie could take place really at any time, because there's nothing crucial to the MCU overall.
I think it's supposed to be, like, very shortly after Civil War, because he's, like, literally coming back to be king, so I think it's like he's coming back from that adventure in Civil War. That
makes sense. It would make sense as to when the timeline would be. So yeah, that's what I figured as well. Probably in mid 2016, if that's when Civil War takes place. But that would make perfect sense. And then they're getting ready for. But the post credit scene with Bucky may not happen until like a year or two later, so we don't really know. But what about you, Phil? Do you feel they made the right decision in not including Bucky in the movie at all until the very end, as kind of like a preview of what to expect in Infinity War?
I think they did a great job of isolating everything on what was going on in Wakanda. You don't see a lot of what's going on in America that much in the movie. You don't even get the viewpoint of any American white people other than Ross.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they did a great job of really focusing it on issues that were going on in Wakanda and not swaying outside of that to the larger MCU.
Yeah, they did a great job of that. That was definitely intentional. We've seen in many other movies, and again, I don't mind that they do this because they like to connect everything. And we've already talked about this before, Chris. Like when they had Iron Man. They had Tony Stark in Homecoming, and they have this guy in that movie, or Black Widow in Iron Man 2 or whatever. Like they like to, or like she was in Winter Soldier and Captain America 2 too. They like to do that just so everything's connected. To make it like, this needs the MCU flavor. It doesn't. It doesn't. It didn't need it, and that obviously showed that was the case, which I was very happy
Ross
with.
and Claw were the only other Marvel characters to really appear, and they were minor characters in their previous appearances. I mean, Martin Freeman in Civil War was a glorified cameo. Like, he's really very inconsequential to that movie, and Claw was just there to provide Ultron with vibranium and talk to, the Maximovs about cuttlefish for a few seconds. Like, it didn't, you're right, it didn't need Captain America to show up and help him or any of that stuff. But to go back to what you were saying a second ago, one of the things I think this movie did brilliantly was it's very clearly a movie about this African country, and yet the movie is done in such a beautiful way that I think everybody who saw it enjoyed it and took something away from it, because even Killmonger has this line, like, aren't all people your people because life started on this continent? Like, even though this is very clearly a black story, it is a story I think so many people can relate to, because there's stuff in here about refugees or the women's slave trade in Nigeria that Nakia is trying to break up. Like, that stuff happens all over the world, and even if you're not black, you can relate to those stories if you have ancestors that have been through any of that stuff. So I feel like this movie did that brilliantly by, like, they made it a story about this African country, but they did it in such a way where you don't have to be any race in particular to enjoy it and love the message of the movie. Like, it broke through that barrier and was just like, you can love this movie even if it has nothing to do with your personal history.
100%. I mean, and all of that stuff that you mentioned too, it's like, it's there, but it's so subtle. And even if it wasn't as subtle, it still would have been good. But they just do it in a way where everything feels organic to the story. It doesn't feel like it was thrown in there just because they wanted to have like some political commentary. Everything just connects so well together, and it all makes sense too. It's not like, I don't know what a good example would be, but like with some films that come out, people complain about how they shoehorned in this and there for whatever reason, blah blah blah. But that doesn't feel like that was the case at all with Black Panther, and that's why it was such a great movie among many other reasons, and just being that damn good. And again, it's absolutely, I completely agree with both of you guys and what you had said earlier, Chris, about it being 100% rewatchable. Obviously, especially now coming off of Chadwick's passing, but just in general, it's such a good movie, and I'm very happy we're able to have this conversation today about the film. And I know we were going to talk about Spider-Man almost originally, and then I asked you, Phil. I know you're a big Spider-Man you're a big Spider-Man fan, right, Phil?
Yes.
Yeah. So. I'm very happy we were able to talk about this one. Spider-Man would have been just as cool, but if we talked about Spider-Man, I don't know who else we would have had on for Black Panther, and I'm not sure when else we would have done it. So I think this was just, I think this is perfect. Because again, if we talked about Spider-Man, we would be talking about Spider-Man a day after Chadwick's passing. So it would have been...
it would have dominated our thoughts. I mean, it's still one of those things where it's like, you're almost hoping that there's a news article that comes out like Chadwick Boseman was hacked and he's really fine. Like, it's probably not going to happen, but it's less than 24 hours, man. It's crazy that he's gone like that. It's so sad, but
it's so sad.
I just hope that because I know he just got married like last year, so I just hope his wife is taking care of herself, because that's got to be unbelievably hard.
That is, I didn't know that, so that just made me sadder than I already was.
I mean,
so.
if you look at, like, I've seen different studies on this, and a lot of actors have died young and left behind, their filmography. And if you look at his filmography, like, it's incredible. It's not that long. He's maybe been in like 15 movies.
Wow.
But the roles that he has had might make him like one of just the best actors of this generation, because as you look at him, he's played Jackie Robinson, James Brown, and Thurgood Marshall, like 3 incredibly important historical people. And then on top of that, you have him in a movie like Gods of Egypt, which wasn't a great movie, but it was still a big budget action movie that he was in. Then he was in Draft Day. He's in all these Marvel movies. That Spike Lee movie he was in got rave reviews. Like, there isn't really a single movie on his filmography that sucks. And there's a lot of actors that just are in some movies that suck. And so he's leaving behind, unfortunately, he's leaving behind a legacy, but it's a great legacy because, I mean, the amount of great roles that he had, that he knocked out of the park, is incredible. Like, for an actor of any age to have that many memorable characters is amazing.
Definitely, and even better than that, the guy was an amazing person. So it's sad, that we lose people like this terribly too soon. But yeah, just the amazing roles that he had and just being a great person on top of it. Final question. You just mentioned it right there, Chris. But for you, Phil, any thoughts on the lasting legacy of Chadwick Boseman as we wrap it up here?
Yeah. So one of the positive takes that I took away from it last night is that we didn't see anything like when Kobe just passed. We didn't see anything where the family didn't get to control the story. And I thought that was one of the blessings in this, is that his family put the message out themselves. You didn't see it come from any news. You didn't see it come from TMZ.
Yep.
It came from them. And I thought that was great. I thought he kept his dignity even in death. And I think that is the best possible thing to come out of this. I think his legacy stands for itself. The 7-year run from 2013 doing 42 and having so many well-known Black characters, as you guys said, on his resume just speaks for itself. The fact that he took his time as an actor and he did so much for Black culture, and he was so dedicated to uplifting and giving us something to believe in. And I think that's going to be his lasting legacy.
Awesome. That's a perfect way to close it out right there. In addition to how, again, we mentioned this at the very start of the show, that no one knew about this, assuming aside from just his very close family and maybe friends and whatnot. But other than that, I think it was unknown that he had cancer dating back to 2016. And you never know what anyone might be going through until something like this happens, which is why, especially in times like now, you just be a good person. Just be kind to one another. I think that's an important lesson to be learned from all of this as well. But yeah, this has been awesome, guys. I'm very happy we were able to have this conversation. I was looking forward to it anyway, but especially in light of his passing, I thought this was fantastic. So thank you, Phil, for coming on. I know this is your debut here on the show. It's a very, very heavy topic to be discussing, and your first time you're talking Marvel. We thought, just another Marvel movie to discuss, and then Chadwick passes away, and then it just turns into something completely different. But just terrible circumstances. But I'm very happy we're able to have you on here today to talk the movie.
Thank you for having me. It's tough to talk about it. I was definitely collecting myself earlier because it is very sad.
Yeah.
But it is good to celebrate, probably one of his biggest accomplishments. So, I can't complain too much. And at the end of the day, I still say all the time, I never thought Black Panther was a movie that would get made and it would come out so well. Mm-hmm. So I can't say anything but good things about that.
Yeah, it's cool that not only was the movie made, but like you said, it just turned out to be one of the best installments in the MCU, which is cool. But this has been great, dude. I'm very happy, like I said, that we were able to get you on to talk about it. And so people can find you on the Twitter machine as well. What's your Twitter handle? Where can people find you?
You can find me at PhilGL616. That is a reference to Universe 616, folks. I'm a big Marvel fan.
Love it. I did not notice that before. That's I'm glad you pointed that out. I did not know that. So that's pretty cool. And obviously you're the man of you're a very busy man. You got a lot of things going on. Just joined Bleacher Report, so congrats on that, which is awesome. You're obviously with Sportskeeda as well, fan side at Daily DDT. You're all over the place, man. People can find you pretty much anywhere, right?
Yeah. Like as you said, you can find my work at Bleacher Report. I do some work at Bell to Bells as well. You can find me at Sportskeeda. I write my own women's wrestling column. And again, you can find me at Daily DDT as well, where I've been recently covering Black Wrestlers Matter.
Nice. Perfect. Well, this has been great, dude. So, again, thanks so much for coming on. We're very happy to have you on the Bleacher Report crew. And just the fact that you're a Marvel fan as well, I'm like, okay, this is perfect. We were happy to have you on anyway, but when we found out, I think... Well, I asked you, actually. I asked you if you were a Marvel fan. I probably should have already known, but when you said yes, I'm like, this is even better. So maybe we should talk to Eric about only having Marvel fans on the team going forward. Maybe that should be a requirement to write for the WWE section of Bleacher Report. But yeah,
if you're going to be a WWE fan, you're probably a superhero fan. There's a lot of crossover there with the spandex and the finishing moves and whatnot.
That's a great point. I still got to. I've mentioned this to you before, Chris. I still got to see if Donnie's an MCU fan or a Marvel fan. I don't think he is, but it's worth looking into anyway. And I would love to get his thoughts on.
I was thinking we should just have like the whole Ring Rust crew on for an episode.
That'd be awesome. Yeah,
that would be funny.
We definitely should. We should. You know what? After we're done here, I'll reach out to either Donnie or Mike or something, and we'll see what we can get going, because they'd already talked about someone coming on for Spider-Man.
Include Brandon on that too.
Brandon too. Yeah. I think that'd be cool. And you know what? I mentioned it before. Even if we can get from a casual viewer perspective of any of these movies. We'll see. So I think that'd be awesome. So that's something to look forward to. The next podcast coming out is Infinity War. Nick, who is on for the other installments of the Avengers ones, should be coming back for that next week, which is cool. What else was I going to mention to you? I think that was it. But yeah, so all of our other reviews are in the description box down below, breaking down all the installments in the MCU. Chris, people can find you on the Twitter machine at @BR_doctor. And yeah, anything else you want to wrap it up with, Chris, as we ride off into the sunset here?
Just rest in peace, Chadwick.
Rest in peace, Chadwick. Great way to end it off. This has been great, guys. Thank you so much again, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.